Few people seem to remember that marriage was invented as an economic solution. Marriage, in the beginning, was, I'll trade your daughter for 3 cows. It was about joining families in attempts to create financial stability and cultural legacy. But what's happened over the last 100 years is that we've tried to turn marriage, this economic institution, into something that is about true love, which is very difficult, has taken a long time, and is incidentally bogus. It would be like if today we tried to hook consumers into money management, investment, and savings with the slogans from Match.com or eHarmony. These are apples and ping pong balls, and trying to make them one and the same is bound to have problems, which is probably why over half of marriages end in divorce. In fact, unsurprisingly, the main reason marriages do break up is due to financial differences. Added to our modern distortions about the institution of marriage, in America we have myths about love. If you've ever seen a romantic comedy, you know that the movie ends after the 2 leads decide to be in a relationship. This is because while love may get a relationship going, love doesn't keep a relationship going. Think about it. If love was the bottom line in a successful relationship, arranged marriages would never work. But they often do. If love was the bottom line in a successful relationship, so long as 2 people love each other, their relationship could outlast financial hardship, affairs, or abuse, till death do they part. But they often don't. I am a marriage and family therapist, and I thought that title would come with the cheat codes on love. Instead, it came with a Tina Turner song. I very clearly remember sitting with a supervisor and discussing a case we were observing, a heterosexual couple who'd come to therapy with quote-unquote communication issues, which is, by the way, what every couple comes to therapy for. I said to my supervisor, "I wonder if he loves her." And she replied, "What does love have to do with it?" It became clear to me that love didn't play the role that American culture had always cast for it. And so my work became about discovering the truth of relationships, about how they really work. And what I discovered in the process is that there is a holy trinity. There are in fact 3 things that serve as the key to any healthy, self-sustaining, fulfilling relationship of any kind, whether it be with a friend, a family member, or a romantic partner. The 3 are communication, trust, and safety. But let me be clear, all 3 of these qualities have to be present at all times for the relationship to thrive. Not 2.5, not 1, not 2 pending, all 3 at all times. Or the relationship is going to fall apart, and perhaps land you in front of someone like me. So the question is, how can we take these 3 things that make relationships work and apply them? Before things get bad enough that you need to see a therapist, before the relationship breaks up, or all of the love disappears. This podcast is brought to you by Painted Brain, a collective of artists, writers, and techies developing community-based solutions to mental health challenges and the impact of social injustice through arts, advocacy, and enterprise. I'm Regan Humphrey, and you're listening to Crimes of the Mind, making mental health accessible in and outside of the therapy room. First, we should talk about vulnerability. No, vulnerability isn't one of the big 3, but it is the oxygen that keeps a relationship alive and breathing. So long as people in a relationship are willing to be vulnerable, willing to risk getting hurt to keep a relationship worth fighting for, the relationship will always stand a chance of survival. As soon as that willingness to be vulnerable dies, so too does the hope of that relationship. Vulnerability is important because to communicate with someone effectively, you have to open up to them about what you feel, want, and think. For people who have limited experience or bad experience with this, even for expert communicators, this is challenging. I don't want to give the impression that it's easy. Relationships are work, even when you have all the tools necessary to maintain them. It takes time to become comfortable with these concepts, and as you get more practice with them, it's good to be on the same page with your partners. Communication is vital in negotiating the way your relationship is going to work. How are the bills going to get paid? What holidays will your family celebrate? How are the kids going to be raised? What kind of sex life do you and your partners want to have? All of these conundrums are solved through clear, honest, and continued communication. On the note of sex in particular, I can tell you that 10 out of 10 sexual problems are actually communication problems. All sexual issues tend to boil down to the matter of relationship partners discussing their needs, desires, curiosities, or setbacks. Even where medical problems arise, communication is required between partners, therapists, and doctors about their situations. So talk about it. Everything. unsatisfying or exciting, difficult or desirable. Communication is also important in building a culture where partners feel appreciated and satisfied. Telling your partner when they make you happy or excited or proud is just as important as letting them know when you're upset or worried or afraid. When relationship successes go uncelebrated or wounds go unaddressed, the relationship suffers for it. Second, to trust someone effectively, you must make yourself vulnerable to the possibility that they could hurt you. Those of you who have danced with love a time or two know that love relies on risk. To achieve big love, one must take big risks. When you trust someone, you put your faith in them, you have to take them at their word. You have to believe them and believe in them. Yes, they will let you down at times and make mistakes. Yes, they will annoy you and sometimes make you upset. The truth is that they could break your heart into 1,000,000 pieces. But you have to allow someone to have that much influence in your life to connect and love on a deeper level. Trust is a huge part of that. When you trust someone, you put your faith in their wanting to be with you. It is their job to help you believe that every day, and it's your job to help yourself believe them every day. You'll never be able to relax into love if you can't trust whoever you're in a relationship with. Suspicion is the enemy of trust. Suspicion undermines trust. Whether your partner has done something to warrant your suspicion or not, your relationship will not be able to take meaningful, long-lasting forward steps so long as trust between you is infected with suspicion. If you're in a relationship that has gone through an affair, or you are someone who has been hurt by an affair in the past, that's something that will affect your relationships. It's something that will likely impact your willingness to trust partners and their willingness to trust you. And the reason for that brings us to our third topic, safety. Safety is deeply intertwined with effective communication and trust. When we talk about safety, an automatic assumption is that safety in a relationship refers explicitly to threats of domestic or interpersonal violence. It is true that if you are in a relationship where you do not feel safe physically, if you are threatening or being threatened, if you are victimizing or being victimized mentally, sexually, or physically, the relationship isn't one that is conducive to your emotional, mental, or physical well-being. Violence of any kind toward pets, people, or objects within the space of the relationship destroys the safety of the relationship dynamics. Period. In relationships where you are touched, hit, followed, or monitored without your consent, or carrying out these behaviors without the consent of your partner, the safety of the relationship is in danger. In these scenarios, safety is being directly undermined. However, we often overlook the fact that safety extends to emotional and mental grounds as well. It is true that if you are in a relationship where you don't feel safe talking about what you feel, talking about what you think, talking about what you want, the relationship isn't one that is conducive to your emotional mental health. If talking honestly with your partner leads to arguing, that leaves you or your partners feeling personally attacked, to shutdowns and refusals to engage or avoidant behaviors, it is likely you and your partners will be left feeling unheard or undervalued. That is a danger to the safety of your relationship. If you don't feel like you will be heard, taken seriously, or met by your partner with genuine interest in your experience of the relationship, it won't be a space that's safe for you emotionally. So on to application. What can we do to make sure these things happen in a relationship? How can we work to build trust, communication, and safety into all of our relationships? How can we use this knowledge actually in our regular lives? One place we can start is by throwing out the American myth that love makes relationships work. Throw it out. I'm not saying you have to stop watching romantic comedies, you don't, but you have to know that love does not keep relationships together. Love makes relationships fun. Love can make relationships meaningful, but it is not, at the end of the day, what will make relationships work. You probably know this, right? Because when people break up, it's not always because they don't love each other anymore. It's not because they didn't love each other when they were in their relationship. It's because they weren't good at communicating with each other, or it's because they weren't good at creating safety for one another, or the trust wasn't there, and therefore the relationship fell apart. The good news is that love happens no matter what. So instead, orient yourself around what you can control, what will make your relationships effective, fulfilling, and ultimately long-lasting. Remember that relationships aren't static. It's not as if once you've established clear communication, trust, and safety you're done and the relationship is fine forever. These are practices you will and should continue to work on as long as your relationships last. Trust, communication, and safety require maintenance. How do you apply communication to a relationship? Communication is hard, especially if you don't come from a family that communicates well or often. Many of us don't. Depending on where you're from, how you grew up, you might come from a place where people don't express their feelings or thoughts in words. They're not open or transparent about what's going on with them, but you need to be in a relationship. It's really important that you and your partners are on the same page. So what I suggest, if you're new to opening up about who you are, is that you start small. Be open with your partners about things that maybe aren't as high stakes. If you can tell your partner what type of ice cream you like, talk to them about silly things that quote unquote don't matter, it'll become easier to talk to them about big things. If you can care about the small parts of someone's experience, the small parts of someone's personality, you can care about the big parts. Try to listen. Try to learn about your partner if they have trouble communicating. Try to make opportunities for them to communicate. And be clear. Being clear is just as important as communication itself. If you're communicating in such a way that you're more confused after the communication happens, you're not communicating well. I want you to know that a lot of people think that being good at communication means you have to be articulate or have a large vocabulary or you have to be particularly intelligent in one way or another, and that's not true. Communication just has to work for you and your partners. If you can talk about every important aspect of your relationship using a series of complex hand signals or bird calls or notes, that's perfectly fine. Don't feel like if you can't communicate the way you see other people communicating, you're bad at it. As many people as there are on Earth, that's how many ways there are to communicate. Just find the way that works for you. Start small. And if you've got the basic communication down and you're just worried about the big things, let me tell you something that so many people miss. Say what you mean. Say what you mean. If you miss someone, don't say, "Where were you?" Say, "I missed you." If you're angry at someone, don't say, "What were you thinking? What were you doing?" Say, "I'm angry with you." Start with how you're feeling. Start with your experience. Say what you're feeling first. When you start from your emotional truth, you start vulnerably. And when you start vulnerably, you cut down on confusion. When you start with, "I'm feeling sad because I saw whatever and I feel like we're losing touch," you're being so much more clear than when you start with what you're thinking. If you start with what you're thinking, you force your partners to guess at what you're feeling. And what you're thinking and feeling could be very, very different. If you start the conversation by setting an example of transparency, your partners can meet you there. Never be afraid to say what you mean. Say what you mean. Say what you mean. Let's talk about trust. Most of the time, when we're having trouble building trust, we're struggling with fear. We're afraid of being hurt or let down, or that we might regret trusting someone in time. One way you can work on trust, if you're someone who struggles with it, is by getting to know yourself. Where do your struggles with trust come from? Do they come from a parent relationship, a sibling relationship, a friend relationship, or school, or growing up? Was there someone in your life you were supposed to trust who let you down? And that letdown, whatever happened, whenever it happened, is it staying with you? Does that letdown move you to be suspicious of someone totally different, who you're in a relationship with, who doesn't deserve it? Are you holding your partners accountable for someone else letting you down? And if you are, I would challenge you to see what you can do to let that go. And now I'm going to use a word that's very charged and causes a lot of different reactions in people: forgiveness. I would challenge you to see if you can forgive whatever trust injury you have. And when I say forgiveness, a lot of people think I mean, oh, you should just forget about whatever happened, or you should just excuse the behavior of someone who trespassed on your trust. And that's not what I mean. And that's not what I believe forgiveness is either. Forgiveness is actually about releasing yourself from the power or pain an experience has on you. It's about setting yourself free from the experience. So if you're carrying around pain from different experiences you've had in your life, pain that makes it hard for you to trust others, I would challenge you to forgive those experiences and set yourself free. Doing so will release you from the past and allow you to start afresh. And what would it mean if you could start afresh? What would it mean if you could trust someone and let go of what happened before? I promise that opening up allows you every possibility for happiness, but you have to be willing to trust. On the other hand, if you're in a relationship with a person or persons and they've done something to make you doubt them, done something that's shaken your faith in them, you have a different challenge on your hands. You have to think about what's important to you and what you want. Because if you want, at the end of the day, to have an effective, fulfilling, meaningful, working relationship with the people you love, then you have to forgive them for what they did, whatever it was. You have to release yourself from the pain their choices caused you. Some people like to say trust, but verify. But that's not trust. That is not trust. If trusting someone is saying you trust them, but behaving as though you have to police them, that is not trust. If you really want this relationship to work, you have to trust them completely, the way you did before they hurt you. And I know that's difficult. I know that sounds foolish, but you have to. It's something you have to do if you want trust to be there. And if you decide you can't forgive them for what they did, then I would suggest ending the relationship. I know that sounds black and white, but I mean it. Relationships cannot function happily and healthily without trust. If you can't or don't want to trust them anymore, don't waste your time or theirs. You all might as well start over with different people that you can trust and be trusted by. And lastly, what can we do to make our relationships safe? My advice? Practice kindness in all situations. When you're angry, be kind. When you're sad, be kind. When you're happy, be kind. Always practice kindness. Don't do things that are threatening to your partner. Don't yell at them. A big part of this is that you can express to someone that you're hurt or angry with them without being threatening or degrading, without hurting them. You can express that you miss or care about someone without invading their personal space. Part of maintaining safety is taking care not to hurt them intentionally. That's never what you want to do. Of course, there might be times when you say something or do something and their feelings are hurt, and that's okay. But when that happens, you have to be ready to be accountable for it. And you have to be ready to listen to them. Safety is about creating a culture of kindness and protection. The idea is that you always want to protect your relationship. The enemies of your relationship are threatening behaviors and violence. The enemies of your relationship are name-calling, shutting your partner out, trying to make them feel stupid, or trying to be right so that they're wrong. These are enemies to the safety of your relationship. These are enemies to your partner and to you. To combat them, you need to practice kindness with your partners and yourself. This podcast is brought to you by Painted Brain, a collective of artists, writers, and techies developing community-based solutions to mental health challenges and the impact of social injustice through arts, advocacy, and enterprise. I'm Regan Humphrey, and you've been listening to Crimes of the Mind, making mental health accessible in and outside the therapy room. Thank you, cheers, and yay.